Have you ever noticed the colorful stripes painted on train cars? Turns out, railway companies don't waste paint just for aesthetic reasons. Every stripe design, or livery, the proper term for it, has a special meaning and serves a very important purpose. Stripes can indicate the speed of the train, the destination, and the type of carriage or service, but they're also part of the variety of symbols that help passengers understand train-related information and navigate through the station and the train. Sometimes you can find special stripes painted in different colors above the last window of some coaches. They warn passengers that this particular coach is somehow different from the others. Of course, these symbols will vary depending on the country. For example, Indian railway operators apply white stripes on blue railway coaches to indicate the unreserved second-class cars of a particular train. These stripes help passengers easily identify the available general coach when the train arrives on the platform. Meanwhile, red stripes on gray coaches indicate the first-class compartments. And these broad yellow stripes, painted on a blue or red background, indicate that the cars are reserved for sick or physically disabled passengers. And if you ever see gray coaches with green stripes on Indian trains, it means that only women are allowed to use them. Also, in 2019, the North Frontier Railway Zone of the Indian Railways introduced these pink female sleeper coaches. They were trying to encourage women to make long-distance journeys. During these trips, train workers make sure that outsiders don't have access to this car to provide better security to the female passengers that travel alone or with minor children. And the bright color helps identify female cars even during rush hours. In Japan, they also use the pink color to put special stripes on metro and suburban train lines to identify women-only cars. Male passengers are not allowed to board these cars during rush hours for security reasons. The same women-only carriages have been created in the subways of Brazil, Dubai, Indonesia, Iran, and Egypt. But let's go back to the railroad. Turns out there's a better way to get rid of annoying fellow travelers. You can buy a private railway carriage, reconstruct its interior, and make your own cozy apartment on wheels. If you're wealthy enough, of course. The National Railroad Passenger Corporation, also known as Amtrak, has provided passenger railroad services in the U.S. and Canada since the 1970s. The company has introduced a special offer. If you have a private carriage, well, Amtrak is eager to hitch it onto the scheduled train services between specified locations. This way, you can adjust your own route and travel all over the United States like a boss. Although you won't have to buy a train ticket, you'll still get a bunch of other fees, including a yearly safety inspection, annual registration fees for your private carriage, a mileage rate based on where and when you're traveling, and any other charges for any extra services. Storage cost in Amtrak's yard, for example, comes in at around $2,000 per month. And you'll have to buy a carriage in the first place. If you're just a beginner in this business without a tight budget, hey, don't worry, they'll train you. Ha, that's a joke. Actually, you can start with an unrestored beater car without electric power. Its price will start at about $25,000. Meanwhile, a fully restored carriage can cost up to $500,000, and up to infinity if you decide to push the interior to the highest level. Why not? And what if you don't want to spend very much money, but would still like to experience a rail trip in your own car? Some private collectors rent out their railway carriages to other people for short-term trips, parties, or historical tours. So, if you want to experience this adventure, just do the research in your area. Some of these tours will allow you to visit masterpiece carriages with truly sophisticated restored interiors. Now, although owning a private carriage is a very expensive hobby, at least you can paint and decorate it however you like. Meanwhile, ordinary commercial rail cars have strict corporate color schemes and cannot afford to be authentic. Sometimes we see very similar trains owned by the same company, but the stripes that decorate the cars on the outside are still slightly different. Have you ever wondered why? Who decides that, and what does it mean? Well, it usually means that the trains have been painted at different times and in different places, following the evolution of the corporate brand book and the arrival of new models of locomotives and cars. For example, Amtrak, as I mentioned earlier, remember, has developed a variety of paint schemes on its rolling stock since the beginning of intercity passenger rail services. There are 7 basic schemes or phases in use. These phases use geometric arrangements of red, white, and blue, representing the colors of the U.S. flag. The themes look alike, but the most attentive passengers will definitely not have a hard time spotting those little variations. Here's the so-called Phase 1, first introduced in 1972. Amtrak painted its locomotives using the elegant platinum mist color, or in more simple terms, light gray. They put the iconic Arrow logo on the side and painted the roofs black. The nose is painted red on purpose. It makes the locomotive more visible to pedestrians and drivers. The company covered its passenger cars with silver paint and then red and blue stripes bracketed by thin white stripes at window level. The chevron logo was then put at one or both ends. 2 years later, the company began to operate the new GE E60 locomotives, and it launched the Phase 2 paint scheme. They replaced the famous red nose and chevron logo on the locomotives and painted stripes similar to those on the passenger cars. Most passenger cars were essentially unchanged from Phase 1 except for the removal of the chevron logo. After 2 years, Amtrak introduced Phase 3 and still uses it on some equipment. It removed the outer white pinstripes on both passenger cars and locomotives. The inner stripe was widened and the red, white, and blue stripes became equally wide. The company also painted turboliners and the LRC test train white and applied stripes at the bottom of the train. The white band was rather reflective and allowed a place for the car information. Continuing our train fashion show, next in 1993, the company introduced Phase 4. It was a striking change after the previous era of the traditional red, white, and blue style. Phase 4 has 2 thin red stripes and a thick dark blue stripe. In this period, Amtrak brought the new Superliner 2 cars into service. In 1997, Amtrak distributed this scheme among some locomotives on the Northeast Corridor services. That's a lot of adjustment so far. But let's move on to the next phase. When Amtrak began to operate Acela Express high-speed train sets in 2000, it launched Phase 5, and it's still widely used today. They painted locomotives light gray. At the top, they applied a blue stripe, which was darker than Phases 1 through 3, but lighter than Phase 4. And the bottom was decorated with a thin red reflective sill stripe. The company put its logo near the front or rear of the unit. Meanwhile, express boxcars received blue stripes on both top and bottom. And all non-passenger cars, like Autotrain Autoracks, received an all-gray finish with one red stripe and logo. And now we're heading into Phase 6, also known as Phase 4B. Why? Don't ask. Amtrak introduced it in 2002, and it's currently in use on most passenger cars. They kept the same stripe style as Phase 4, including wide window stripes on single-level cars and narrow stripes on superliners. The red reflective sill stripe and mid-tone blue on Phase 5 are still in use. Single-level cars got white logos within a blue stripe, while superliners got blue logos below the stripes. 5 of the first 6 Siemens Charger ALC 42 logos retain this beautiful Phase 6 scheme, mostly blue body with red and black around the windshield and red and silver chevrons at the rear. In July 2021, Amtrak celebrated its 50th anniversary and introduced some new designs to mark this milestone. 6 new specially made anniversary locomotives include this unique midnight blue livery that celebrates the company's employees who keep passengers moving across the nation throughout the night. Amtrak also presented a sneak peek of what Phase 7 will look like and promised to bring a greater sense of modernity and cohesion throughout their train designs. Okay, but what about this fashionable train creature? You've probably recognized this color scheme. Railway companies call it tiger stripes because it reminds them of the stripes of a tiger. Okay, I get it. They use this paint pattern to improve the visibility of their locomotives. First of all, the entire locomotive gets painted bright yellow, and then they add diagonal black stripes to the front and back. This way you can see this tiger moving from a very far distance. And, like, keep off the tracks.